Hello and welcome to today's video where we will be covering the top 5 Sony cameras for video in 2024. Now, we've broken the cameras down into categories. So we have the best beginner camera, the best beginner upgrade, the best value camera, the runner-up, and the best all-around video camera. There will be links to all of these cameras down in the description, so be sure to check those out if you want to pick one up yourself. Now, one thing to note is that all of these cameras are interchangeable lens cameras, so there are lots of options to take each of these cameras to the next level. So make sure you check out our video, Top 4 Sony Lenses for Filming Video, to make the most out of whatever camera you choose. All right, let's dive into the best beginner camera. So the best beginner Sony camera for video in 2024 is going to be the Sony ZV-E10, and that's actually what I'm filming on right now. It's really easy to use for anyone, regardless of if you've ever used a camera before or not, and you can get some incredible footage out of this tiny, affordable camera. So some of the pros of this camera are that it's affordable, it's really easy to use. There are only a few different modes on this camera. There's photos for capturing stills up to 24.2 megapixels, video for capturing videos in 4K or 1080p, and there's S&Q mode for slow motion videos as well as time lapses. But one thing to note is that this feature can only capture 1080p and does not record sound, which is something to be mindful of. Now, there's also some really great beginner features that come with this camera. So there's a defocus mode. So this feature will automatically create that blurry background or not, depending on your preference, without needing to know a thing about aperture or how that works. It also comes with a product showcase mode. So this is super helpful if you do any sort of product review videos to change the focus from your face to whatever it is that you want to showcase, which is handy because the autofocus is fantastic. It also comes with some great image quality, even at this price. So the Sony ZV-E10 shoots oversampled 4K video at 24 frames per second and 30 frames per second. Now, another good feature is the active stabilization, which is great since there is no in-body image stabilization on this camera, and it works pretty good, but just keep in mind the 1.44 times crop factor. All right, now taking a look at some of the cons. Like I just mentioned, there's no in-body image stabilization, which will limit your handheld work, and you may want to opt for lenses that have optical stabilization built in. 8-bit color. Now, although the ZV-E10 produces a fantastic image, it is only 8-bit color, which only produces 16 million colors. Now, this might sound like a lot, but the rest of the cameras on this list are sporting a 10-bit color, which produces over 1 billion colors, or 64 times the amount of color. Now, this just allows you to push your color grade further without the image falling apart. Weak battery. So the NP-FW50 battery in the ZV-E10 does not support all-day shooting, so you will want to pick up several backup batteries if you are out and about, or if you're in the studio, consider picking up a continuous power source. 1 memory card slot. At this price point, you really wouldn't expect 2 memory card slots, but it would be nice to have. Crop in 4K 30. So there's a noticeable crop when shooting in 4K 30 frames per second mode. So it's a 1.23 times crop, which is the same as the A6100, but there's no crop when shooting in 24 frames per second. Rolling shutter. So this is only really a problem if you're whipping the camera around, but if you're in a studio setting like this or on a tripod, you won't have to worry about this. Okay, so moving on to our best beginner upgrade pick, we have the new Sony A6700. So like the Sony ZV-E10, this is an APS-C sensor camera, but that is about where the similarities end. Now, take a look at some of the pros of this camera. It is pretty affordable, priced at $13.98 at the time of recording. This is the second most affordable camera on our list with some impressive features at that price point. The A6700 comes with 10-bit 422 color, and this is an upgrade in color space compared to the Sony ZV-E10 and will be very noticeable difference and allow you to push those color grades even further. More 4K frame rates, so if you need some slow-mo 4K footage, this camera has you covered. With the ability to shoot at 4K 24, 30, 60, and 120 frames per second, you have a lot more capabilities with this camera. Do note that there is a small 1.04 times crop at 60 frames per second 4K and a more noticeable 1.58 times crop at 120 frames per second. Now, while this video is focusing on the top Sony cameras for video, the Sony A6700 is great for hybrid shooters. It's an excellent choice for those who want to shoot not only video, but take some amazing pictures as well. With a 26 megapixel sensor and quick switch dials to go from photo to video, as well as 3 custom settings for for each mode, photo, video, and S&Q mode. This is a great camera for those looking to do both photo and video at a high level. And moving on to some of the cons of this camera, there's only one memory card slot. Again, at this price point, you may not expect 2 memory card slots, but it would be nice to have, especially if you're planning to do any sort of paid or commercial work. Now, if that is something that you need and you kind of want to stay in this APS-C ecosystem, then consider the FX30, which barely didn't make the list for this video. The A6700 also has a potential to overheat. Due to its small size and lack of fans, there is the possibility to overheat, especially when shooting in 4K for long periods of time exposed to the sun. And lastly, it's an APS-C sensor. Now, some might see this as a con, while others might see this as a pro, as it keeps the camera and lenses costs down, as well as both their size and weight. All right, moving on to our best value Sony camera for video, we have the Sony ZV-E1 priced at $2198. Now, this is the first full frame camera on this list. So some of the pros of this camera are its incredible video quality. It has the same sensor as the famous A7S III and the FX3. Now, while it has that same sensor, it's gonna come in a much smaller form factor, which could be great for vlogging or traveling. It also has Sony's dynamic active steady shot, which gets you that gimbal-like footage, which could be really convenient if you don't want to haul around a gimbal. The Sony ZV-E1 is also very easy to use and has a similar body structure and feel to the Sony ZV-E10. It also has some built-in color profiles to get you a cinematic look for those of you who don't want to color grade. It also has some AI-powered features as well, which includes innovative AI features like auto framing, which intelligently tracks the subject, giving the perception of a human-operated camera, and enhanced subject detection autofocus for humans, animals, birds, insects, and vehicles. The ZV-E1 also comes with quality in-camera microphones. It's equipped with clear sounding microphones that support various audio pickup patterns useful for different filming scenarios. Now, some of the cons of the ZV-E1 is it only has one memory card slot. So the lack of the dual card slots may deter serious filmmakers who prefer the redundancy of simultaneous recording to 2 memory cards. There's also no viewfinder on the camera, so it lacks the physical viewfinder, which can be a drawback for some users, especially in bright outdoor settings where using the screen may be challenging. There's also just less customization buttons options compared to some of the higher end Sony cameras. It also has a micro HDMI port versus a full-size HDMI port, which may or may not be a deal breaker for you. And there's also no mechanical shutter. And lastly, there may be some limitations in long form 4K 60 or 4K 120 recording. There's possibilities of it overheating and shutting down around 40 minutes in 4K 60 recording, limiting its use for longer continuous shots at higher frame rates. Okay, moving into our runner-up camera, we have the Sony a7S III coming in at $3498. Now, some of the pros of this camera is that it has the same amazing sensor as the previous camera, the Sony ZV-E1, as well as the FX3, which is incredible in low light with dual native ISOs at 640 and 12,800, so you can basically see in the dark. It also has an advanced viewfinder. So the new electronic viewfinder with 9.44 million dot resolution and a 0.91 times magnification offers an excellent viewing experience, which can be helpful if shooting in sunny situations or if taking photos. This is also the first camera on the list with 2 memory card slots, which is a must for any pro or paid work. It can also shoot 4K 120 with no crop at all. Now, some of the cons of the Sony a7S III, first and foremost, is the price. At $3498, this is an expensive camera. Another con is that it only takes 12 megapixel photos. Again, this video is about the top Sony video cameras, but if you're looking to do a bit of photos as well, this only can take 12 megapixel photos. Now, there are also some limitations in the active steady shot. So you lose active steady shot image stabilization in 4K 120 due to a slight crop, which potentially affects video stabilization in the high frame rate recordings. And that's about it for the cons. This is an excellent camera and it's really hard to find any cons on it. Okay, and taking a look at the best all-around Sony video camera, we have the Sony FX3 coming in at $3898 for the body alone. Now, getting into the pros of the Sony FX3, it has superb image quality. Again, this is the same sensor as the previous 2 cameras, the Sony ZV-E1 and the Sony a7S III, and it's one of the best sensors you can use at this price point for video today. It also has incredible dynamic range. So shooting an S-Log3 with the Sony FX3 allows for capturing 15 stops of dynamic range, providing a wide range of data for creative color grading and enhanced image quality. Some other pros of the Sony FX3 is that it has buttons around it to record from different positions positions. So if you record yourself, there is a button on the front that you can click to record, as well as tally lights around the camera to ensure that it is recording. There's also some versatile mounting options with the Sony FX3. So the camera body includes multiple quarter 20 screw holes, allowing for direct and efficient attachments of various accessories. The Sony FX3 also has advanced autofocus, so features like phase detection, autofocus, face tracking, and eye autofocus ensure that every frame is in focus, even at 120 frames per second. Another pro is the optional XLR handle to get that professional level audio. But do note that that does come at an additional cost and can be picked up later if you want to just get the body to start with. Now, looking at some of the cons of the FX3, the first one that comes to mind is the lack of built-in ND filters. Marketed as a cinema camera and at a price point of just under $4,000, it would be really nice to have some built-in ND filters similar to the Sony FX6. So the lack of built-in ND filters requires external ND filters for controlling exposure in bright conditions, adding to the gear that you need to carry and use. So there's no physical viewfinder. So the absence of a physical viewfinder might be a disadvantage for some users, especially when shooting in bright outdoor environments. And lastly, there is no shutter angle control. So this is a preferred feature for that cinematic control that's currently missing, impacting how your motion blur appears in footage. But there is news that there will be an update coming towards the end of 2024 to where on a handful of Sony cameras, including the Sony FX3, you will be able to change the shutter angle and not just the shutter speed. So to wrap things up, Sony's 2024 lineup offers something for every videographer, from complete beginners to seasoned professionals. Each camera has been designed with specific users in mind, ensuring you can find the perfect match for your video projects. Now remember, the best camera is the one that meets your unique needs, helping you to capture your vision with clarity and creativity. So thank you for joining me in this exploration of Sony's top cameras for video in 2024. Now don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because on this channel, we show you the best deals for things like the top Sony cameras for video in 2024. And remember, there will be links to all these cameras to pick up for yourself down in the description, so be sure to check that out. And thank you again for watching. We will see you in the next video.